There were three patients who were not feeling well. I attended to two of them. One of them was really just about ready to faint. I gave her some oxygen. I attended to her for a little bit of time, and she sort of came out of it quite nicely and was quite appreciative. The other person had some abdominal pain, didn't take that much time either. And then I went to the third passenger who was being attended to by another person who turned out to be another physician who had volunteered as well. I asked that physician if he needed any help. I identified myself as a doctor. He said he did not need any help. He was able to handle it. And I said, okay. And I went back to my seat and fell asleep effectively.
What happened next?
About a half hour later, I was rudely awoken by the chief stewardess again, opened the lights. She started to shake me awake and said, look, there's a problem in the back of the plane. The other fellow is about to give an injection. I don't know, what's going on. I want you to come to the back. And I said, no, I don't want to go to the back. He's a physician. I've done my job. So she said, no, please, you've just got to come back. And she really coerced me into standing up and going back. It was quite unpleasant. So we continued to the back of the plane, at which point the other physician saw me coming back again to ask him questions. He started to yell at the chief stewardess, look, I showed these other stewardesses my identification. Now you don't trust me? He had an injection that he was prepared to be giving this passenger. He threw it into the emergency cart, which had been drawn out, and left the scene, leaving me alone in the back of the plane with this other passenger who I really didn't know what was going on.
Now, so is this a Good Samaritan medical emergency, or is this a Good Samaritan request for a second opinion?
Well, you better understand what Good Samaritan means, and this is a real misconception. In order for Good Samaritan protection to be accepted, you need three components to it. Number one, it has to be voluntary. Number two, it has to be life-threatening, an emergent situation that has to be attended to immediately. And number three, there are no fees that are being asked for, there are no fees being given. So this was not a Good Samaritan situation. Number one, I did not volunteer. Number two, it was not an emergency. In fact, this other physician was handling the situation, but for the miscommunication and the panic among the stewardesses, I wouldn't have been woken up. Air Canada does not have a right to wake up any passenger they determine can help them at any moment in time.
So what happened when you saw this patient following the walking away by the first physician?
Turned out the woman was having a panic attack.
Mom likes to cry.
The other
Mom's
doctor
not
was about
getting
to
in.
give her an
She's not?
injection of Valium.
Oh, okay.
I spent about an hour and a half with her, talking her down, calming her down, and then I went back to my seat again to try and get some more sleep.
What happened next?
Well, the chief stewardess came and woke me up again and said, here are some incident reports. You have to fill them up. At this point, I was really annoyed, and I said to her, you know what, I've done this many times before. I said, this isn't fair. I volunteered the first time. I didn't volunteer the last two times. You woke me up. You disrupted my sleep. I said, I expect Air Canada to do something for this. And she said, you're absolutely right. Here's my identification number. I'm going to get you some forms to fill out, and you can request something from Air Canada. So I said, great. She came back a little while later and says, I don't have those forms, but here's an email address. Just write to them, and I'm sure they'll take care of you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Did they take care of you?
Well, I wrote to them. They wrote me back saying, thanks for being a good guy. Here are 10,000 points in lieu of your trouble. I wrote back to them and I said, you know what? It cost me 160,000 points to fly business class, plus $600 of taxes. I said, I didn't ask for any break because I was a physician. I said, I think as a bare minimum, you should replace the points. So they kept saying to me, well, not really, no, we don't have to do anything. And in fact, if we give you something, it changes you from being a good volunteer or a good Samaritan. But what really ticked me off was a letter written to me after a correspondence back and forth with Air Canada from legal counsel from Air Canada. She said to me the following: you are a physician. You are legally and ethically obliged to act on our behalf if there's a problem on the plane. We are not bound to give you anything. So just take what we give you and say thank you. That was the last resort. I said to them, you know what? In this case, I'm taking you to court. I am not legally, ethically bound to act on your behalf. I am if there is an emergent, life-threatening situation on a plane or anywhere else, as any physician is. So it's not an issue about acting or not acting, because we would always act in an emergency situation. However, in non-emergency situations, we're not obliged.
What reaction have you gotten from people? You've taken quite a stand here.
Well, most of the professionals have been very supportive. They understand that we have to sort of determine that there's a fair principle as to when a physician or healthcare professional can really be involved in other people's care. For instance, I work, as you do and most of us, very hard during the entire day. That doesn't mean if I'm out at dinner with my family, I want somebody to come over to me and say, look, I know you're a doctor. Somebody at my table has a headache. I'd like you to come over right now and just discuss it with him because you're here, for God's sakes. We should have the right to be able to say we're only people and we have some private time, and we're not on call 24/7 for everybody under any circumstance.
Of course, you practice in Quebec, and Quebec has a good Samaritan law that requires everyone to help others if they can.
No, only if their life is in peril. So you have to distinguish this again. It's not an absolute obligation to help anybody under any circumstance. No. If their life is in peril, yes, we are obliged to act.
But by the same token, we don't always know when a person's life is in peril. And sometimes we have to either give the benefit of the doubt or assume the worst. You know, that woman at the back of the plane that you were talking about who was having a panic attack, in fact, could have been having a heart attack.
Except that person was already being attended to by a physician who was dealing with her. So that assessment had already been made. And you're absolutely right. If that, for instance, my example of saying somebody has a headache next to me, my obligation would probably be to say, is this a stroke? Is this an aneurysm? Is this a bleed? Is this, oh, it's not, it's just a headache. You've had the same headache for I don't have to act.
How likely is it that you'll actually resist a call to help, regardless of the situation?
Well, I'll tell you what many physicians have told me. They tell me when they get on an airplane, for instance, the first thing they do is take 2 scotches so that they're out of the formula. They're not involved. Most of us will always get involved. I've been involved again since this case. This would never stop me from getting involved. If I think there's an emergency, or until such time as I can ascertain that there is no emergency, I will always get involved. That's my legal, ethical responsibility. I would never shirk it. But I also similarly would not allow Air Canada to take advantage of any healthcare professional by them determining what our obligations are. They're incorrect in that regard.
In 2007, Coopersmith took Air Canada to small claims court in Quebec. The doctor made his own case, while across the courtroom, the airline fought tooth and nail to avoid having to give in, assembling a 5-person legal team, including a lawyer, an expert witness, and its chief medical officer. The judge sided with Coopersmith and ordered Air Canada to pay him $1,000 in damages.
Wow.
The airline has applied to the Quebec Superior Court for a judicial review. We invited Air Canada to comment. A spokesperson said the airline has nothing to add to what it argued in court.
Oh my gosh, that's great.